3 years ago, I almost stopped trying to root plants in water. Every time I took a healthy cutting, the same thing seemed to happen. I would place the stem in a clean glass of water, set it near a bright window, and wait. For a few days, everything looked promising. Then the water turned cloudy. The stem became soft. Before long, the cutting was rotting instead of rooting. What confused me most was watching other gardeners do exactly the same thing and get completely different results. Their cuttings produced strong white roots, while mine slowly fell apart. I started wondering if some people simply had a natural talent for gardening that I did not have. Maybe you have felt the same way. Maybe you have watched a favorite plant cutting fail and wondered what went wrong. Maybe you have bought rooting products, changed containers, or moved plants from one window to another, hoping something would finally work. The good news is that successful propagation is not about luck, and it is not about having a special green thumb. In fact, most cuttings fail for one simple reason: they do not survive long enough to grow roots. That may sound surprising, but think about what happens the moment a stem is separated from its parent plant. It instantly loses its normal supply of water, nutrients, and protection. At the same time, the freshly cut tissue becomes vulnerable to bacteria, fungi, and stress. Before a cutting can focus on growing roots, it must first stay healthy. That is where many gardeners unknowingly lose the battle. Today, I want to show you several natural methods that can dramatically improve your chances of success without relying on expensive products. One of them is probably sitting in your kitchen right now. Another may already be growing on your windowsill. And later, I will share an old gardening secret that many modern gardeners have never even heard of. But there is something even more important. Near the end of this video, I will reveal the mistake that quietly ruins thousands of perfectly healthy cuttings every year. Most people never realize they are making it, yet fixing that one problem can completely change their results. So if you have ever watched a cutting turn brown in water, if you have ever wondered why some plants root effortlessly while others fail, or if you simply want a faster and more reliable way to grow new plants for free, stay with me. Because once you understand what a cutting truly needs during its first few days, propagation becomes much simpler than most people think. And it all starts with protecting the cutting before the roots ever appear. The first natural helper I want to show you is something that surprises almost everyone when they hear about it. In fact, when I first learned this method, I was skeptical myself. After all, when most people think about honey, they think about tea, toast, or baking. They certainly do not think about plant propagation. Yet gardeners have been using raw honey for generations. The reason is surprisingly simple. A fresh cutting is essentially an open wound. Just like any wound, the cleaner and healthier it remains during the healing process, the better the outcome is likely to be. Raw honey has long been valued for its natural protective properties, which is why many gardeners use it to help shield freshly cut plant tissue during those critical first days. The process could not be easier. After taking a cutting and making a clean cut just below a healthy leaf node, lightly dip the cut end into a small amount of raw honey. You only need a thin coating. Then place the cutting into clean water as you normally would. That is it. No complicated equipment, no expensive rooting powders, no special gardening skills. What many gardeners notice is that the cutting often remains healthier while it begins forming callus tissue. These small white bumps that appear near the cut are often the first sign that root development may soon follow. One plant that particularly benefits from careful wound protection is the rubber plant, also known as Ficus elastica. If you have ever tried propagating one, you know how quickly the cut stem can sometimes deteriorate in water. A light coating of honey before rooting may help the cutting stay healthier during the early stages, giving it a better opportunity to develop roots. Now, I want to be clear about something. Honey is not magic. It does not force roots to appear overnight. No natural ingredient can replace proper temperature, clean water, and good cutting technique. What honey does is help create better conditions while the plant does the actual work. And that is an important lesson in gardening. The goal is not to force growth. The goal is to remove obstacles that prevent growth from happening naturally. But as useful as honey can be, there is another natural rooting aid that many gardeners consider even more impressive. In fact, if you have an aloe vera plant sitting on a windowsill somewhere in your home, you may already own one of the most valuable propagation tools a gardener can have. And unlike most commercial products, it is alive, growing, and ready to help your next cutting right now. If honey helps protect a cutting during its most vulnerable days, aloe vera helps encourage it to move forward. For years, I thought aloe vera was simply a useful plant for minor skin irritations, but experienced gardeners often see it very differently. Many consider it one of the most valuable plants for propagation. Inside those thick leaves is a clear gel that has been used for generations as a natural aid for freshly cut stems. The process is simple. A small piece of aloe vera leaf is cut open and the clear gel is removed. The cutting can be lightly coated with the gel before being placed into water, or the gel can be mixed into a small amount of water to create a gentle rooting solution. What gardeners often appreciate about aloe vera is that it is easy to use, inexpensive, and already growing in many homes. Over time, I noticed that cuttings treated with aloe vera often remained healthier during the early stages of propagation. The stem stayed firm, the water remained cleaner, and root development frequently appeared sooner than expected. While no method guarantees success, aloe vera can help create conditions that favor healthy growth rather than decline. But there is another traditional method that many gardeners consider even more fascinating. It comes from a tree that has been quietly helping gardeners for generations. I am talking about willow water. If you have ever seen a willow tree growing near a pond or stream, you know how vigorous these trees can be. Even small branches often seem eager to grow. Long ago, gardeners noticed this unusual ability and began experimenting with young willow stems. The result was willow water, a traditional rooting solution made by soaking fresh young willow branches in hot water for about 24 hours. The liquid that remains contains naturally occurring compounds associated with growth and recovery. Many gardeners soak fresh cuttings in willow water before placing them into a rooting container. Others use it during the first stages of propagation to provide additional support while roots begin to develop. What I like most about willow water is not that it promises miracles. It reminds us that gardeners solve problems long before shelves were filled with specialty products. They learned by observing nature and paying attention to what worked. If you happen to have access to a willow tree, this is one of the easiest and least expensive propagation aids you can make at home. There is one final natural helper worth mentioning before we move on. It is something most people already have in their kitchen. Ordinary ground cinnamon has been used by gardeners for many years as a protective treatment for freshly cut plant tissue. A light dusting on the cut surface may help keep the wound cleaner while the plant begins healing. It is simple, affordable, and easy to apply. What is interesting is that honey, aloe vera, willow water, and cinnamon all share the same purpose. None of them force roots to appear. None of them work like magic. Instead, they help create a healthier environment while the plant does what it was designed to do. And that brings us to an important truth. Even the best natural rooting aid cannot overcome a few common mistakes that quietly destroy thousands of cuttings every year. In fact, one of these mistakes is so common that many gardeners repeat it for years without realizing it. If your cuttings have struggled in the past, there is a good chance you have encountered at least one of them. Let's look at the 5 biggest mistakes that prevent healthy cuttings from becoming strong new plants. By now, you might be thinking that successful propagation is all about finding the right natural rooting aid. Honey, aloe vera, willow water, and cinnamon can certainly help. But over the years, I discovered that most failed cuttings have very little to do with a lack of rooting boosters. In fact, many cuttings fail because of a handful of simple mistakes that gardeners unknowingly repeat over and over again. The first mistake is using the wrong water. Many people take a cutting and immediately place it into freshly drawn tap water without considering what is actually in that water. Depending on where you live, tap water may contain chlorine or high mineral levels that can place additional stress on a freshly cut stem. Whenever possible, I prefer using collected rainwater because it is naturally soft and gentle on plants. If rainwater is not available, simply allowing tap water to sit uncovered for 24 hours before using it can often improve conditions for propagation. The second mistake is giving the cutting too much sunlight. This surprises many beginners because we are constantly told that plants need sunlight to grow. While that is true, a cutting without roots is not yet functioning like a mature plant. It can lose moisture through its leaves much faster than it can replace that moisture. When placed in direct afternoon sun, the cutting may become stressed before roots have a chance to form. Bright indirect light is usually a far better choice. It provides the energy signal the plant needs without creating excessive heat or moisture loss. The third mistake is cutting in the wrong location. Roots rarely appear efficiently from random sections of stem. Most successful roots develop from leaf nodes, the small points where leaves emerge from the stem. These areas contain highly active plant tissue capable of producing new growth. Whenever you take a cutting, make your cut just below a healthy node and ensure that node sits beneath the water surface. This one habit alone can dramatically improve propagation success. The fourth mistake is leaving too many leaves on the cutting. This is especially common when gardeners want the cutting to look large and impressive. The problem is that every leaf requires water to stay alive. Without roots, the cutting must support all of those leaves using a very limited supply of stored energy. Too many leaves create unnecessary stress. In most cases, 2 or 3 healthy leaves are more than enough. Removing excess foliage allows the cutting to focus on root production rather than leaf maintenance. The fifth mistake is ignoring temperature. Most popular houseplants originate from warm regions where growth occurs under stable conditions. When a cutting sits near a cold window, an air conditioning vent, or a drafty area, cell activity slows dramatically. Root formation may stall completely. I have found that most common houseplants root best when temperatures remain comfortably warm, generally between 72 and 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm conditions encourage faster recovery and stronger root development. There is one additional mistake that deserves special attention because many gardeners never think about it. Oxygen. Plant roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. When water sits unchanged for long periods, oxygen levels gradually decline and the environment becomes less favorable for healthy root growth. This is why changing the water every 3 or 4 days is so important. Fresh water introduces fresh oxygen and helps maintain a healthier rooting environment. Once I understood these mistakes, my success rate improved more than it did from any product I had ever purchased. The truth is that healthy propagation is usually about creating the right conditions rather than searching for a miracle solution. But even when roots finally appear, there is still one stage where many gardeners lose otherwise healthy plants. In fact, some cuttings survive every challenge we have discussed so far only to struggle after being moved into soil. Fortunately, there is a simple way to avoid that problem, and it may be the most valuable lesson in this entire video. Now we come to the stage where many gardeners believe the hard part is over. The cutting has survived, roots have appeared, and everything seems to be going perfectly. Yet this is exactly where a surprising number of healthy cuttings are lost. The transition from water to soil can be stressful because the roots that develop in water are very different from the roots that eventually thrive in potting soil. Water roots are soft, delicate, and adapted to constant moisture. When they are suddenly placed into dry or compact soil, the plant can experience shock. Many beginners mistake this temporary stress for failure. The key is to make the transition as gradual as possible. When transplanting a rooted cutting, use a light, well-draining potting mix and keep it consistently moist during the first week. The goal is not to keep the soil soggy, but to prevent the young roots from drying out while they adapt to their new environment. Some gardeners even add small amounts of potting soil to the water container over several days before transplanting. This gentle transition helps the roots become familiar with their future growing medium. Humidity can also make a significant difference during this period. Newly transplanted cuttings often lose moisture through their leaves faster than their developing root systems can replace it. One simple solution is creating a temporary mini greenhouse by loosely covering the pot with a clear plastic bag. This helps maintain humidity around the plant while the roots strengthen. Just remember to allow fresh air inside once each day to prevent excessive moisture buildup. Patience is equally important. During the first couple of weeks after transplanting, much of the plant's growth is happening below the soil surface where you cannot see it. Many gardeners become discouraged because they do not immediately notice new leaves or visible growth. In reality, the plant is often investing its energy into building a stronger root system. Once those roots become established, new growth usually follows. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned about propagation is that success rarely comes from a single secret ingredient. Honey can help. Aloe vera can help. Willow water can help. Good technique, proper temperature, clean water, and patience can all help. But the real key is understanding what the cutting needs during each stage of the process. A cutting is not trying to become a plant. It already is a plant. Our job is simply to create conditions that allow it to continue growing. The next time you trim a favorite houseplant, do not see that small stem as garden waste. See it as an opportunity. With the right approach, that single cutting can become a healthy new plant, a gift for a friend, or the beginning of an entire collection. That is one of the most rewarding parts of gardening. Watching something small develop into something strong. If today's video helped you understand plant propagation in a new way, I hope you will join us again here at The Green Hack. We are always exploring practical gardening methods that help everyday gardeners achieve better results naturally. Until next time, stay curious, keep growing, and never underestimate what a single healthy cutting can become.